Hey everyone, do we have any topics for today? All right, if there's no agenda, maybe we should give you guys some time back.
Lynn,
Yeah.
my only idea is if we wanted to run through the board just to check on the status of any work items. That's just one idea, but if there hasn't been much movement, just to see if we're on track.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, if anybody made any progress towards the master item, I think now is probably a good time to say it. Let's see, let me present my screen. I know I added the verify mutual TLS to the doc, so that was one item I signed up.
I started working on the ambient only mode.
Ambient.
You can probably filter to only the GA must have.
Yeah, let me do that. I guess it's a must. Okay, so I should move this to up in progress. Is that right? And John, I think you also did status reporting, and Ian, I think you're still also working on this too. Am I right?
Yeah, so we merged the kind of initial one, which gets up the one status message and kind of the core infrastructure so that we can add more. So the remaining steps are to add more status messages, basically. And also this leader election thing we need to figure out.
We can mostly divide and conquer now, I think. So this is
That's
big progress.
Awesome. So we had a couple of things in progress. I think this is in progress. Yeah, is there any progress on the multi-cluster and cross-version compatibility? I don't know if Keith is on or I don't see Keith or Mitch on. So is there anything anyone else is working on? Let me expand it to the GA list. Jackie, are you working on anything at the moment?
No, not for ambient right now.
All right. Is there anybody else working on anything? I assume no. Okay, so I think there's definitely enough progress made, but two of the items, hopefully, Mitch and Keith can give us an update on the multi-cluster stuff, and I'm hoping somebody else in the community could pick this up. Ambient's cross-version compatibility. That would be really cool. All right. Anything else we should be discussing on the board, Jackie? Does that help?
Yeah, that was great. I just thought it would be useful to take a look at, make sure on track, and just helpful to utilize it now that we have it.
Yeah, and I guess a core ask here is, we would really appreciate some other folks in the community also pick up some of the work as well. That would be really good. All right, thanks all. Anything else we should be discussing before I let you guys go?
I put on the I noticed it's come up a few times now, the waypoint ingress composition thing that users seems to be struggling with.
Yeah, Saka actually provided a workaround for that. Did you see that?
Yeah, the workaround's pretty clunky though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious for thoughts on like how the UX for this should feel, because we have no clear consensus upstream over in Gateway API either.
Right. I mean, this can either be. I mean, we can stay in the existing idiom and say, we have waypoint 4 and use waypoint, and we can have something that looks like that says, compose with ingress. We can see in this secondary kind of level things, right? We want to make that a global option, a gateway class option, not just a gateway option. And then obviously long-term in the gateway API, there's not going to be annotations, right? Because obviously the things, the waypoint 4 and use waypoint are not yet things in the gateway API. What might that API look like down the road? But I would generally lean towards staying within the idioms that we've used, and if annotations need to turn into CRs over time, then that's kind of done more holistically. That would be my leaning at the moment.
Strong +1 for that. I don't want to. There's too many different permutations of this problem upstream, and it's something that we should just solve and then find a pattern that works and then try to push our experience upstream to influence and inform what happens there eventually.
Okay. Anyone have any other ideas on that, or does that sound generally good to most people?
Could someone give a brief summary of the issue again?
Sure. So we intentionally chose, when you create a waypoint, that we had a choice to make about whether ingresses would send traffic to the waypoint or whether they would send traffic directly to the workload. And we had to make a default choice in that case, and the default choice that we made was to send traffic directly to the workload. One, because we weren't sure how people were going to compose policies. They may put the same policy in the ingress and in the waypoint. And so it wasn't entirely clear if they wanted the waypoint and ingress to compose, or if they wanted ingress to be just configured enough to do most of the things they wanted the waypoint to do and go directly to the workload. So that's basically what happened. We're obviously finding a fair number of users who are expecting ingress to talk to waypoints.
And generic upstream problem in Gateway API is dealing with any out of cluster load balance or any out of cluster Gateway API implementation sending traffic to endpoints within the cluster. Should it go directly to those endpoints, or if gamma rules of some sort are configured, is it even possible to enforce those somehow? Is there a pattern of like directing it to an ingress rather than directly to the pods? Yeah, there's a few different like similar problems that are related to this.
Got it. Okay, thanks for summarizing. That's helpful.
I mean, do we even have a choice here? Because for multi-cluster, go ahead, Lee.
Well, I mean, we definitely had a choice because we've made one. And some users seem to be okay with it, and some users seem to not be okay with it. I mean, obviously they're, like you said, they're confused with like multi-cluster. Did anything come through an ingress in the first place, etc. Right?
It's not only multi-cluster, it's also the whole concept of being able to, interop and mix and match with other gateway implementation and other things. But multi-cluster is a kind of a forcing function. I mean, it's since if you have the workloads in a different cluster, the policies for the workloads obviously are not known to the ingress. So there is no scenario where an ingress in cluster A would be able to apply policies for something that is in a different cluster. Well, it's not realistic.
Well, I mean, it depends how they're configured, right, Custom? Right? It's possible.
Not with our current model, where we across cluster we only read the endpoints. We don't actually allow one cluster to define policies for another cluster.
Yeah, it's not ideal if you're trying to go pod to pod directly across cluster. If you're funneling through an east-west gateway that can be an enforcement point on the destination cluster, some of the stuff becomes possible. But yeah, this is like, there's a few different architectures here and also like varying preferences and constraints of different implementations.
Yeah, that's why we don't have a choice, because the separation of config is super important for the design. I mean, it's not something we can change easily. And second, the interop goal would imply that the waypoint may be something we don't even know about that has its own policies. And our ingress, I mean, either side can be a different implementation. You can have, a random ingress that is enforcing its own policies and a receive waypoint, or a random external waypoint. And I mean, it's we cannot assume that one implementation of a component matches and has the same policies as the other.
I mean, I would say that for multi-cluster traffic, you can only guarantee waypoint traversal in the receiving cluster if the traffic comes in through a gateway that is mesh aware, right? Like the east-west gateway, like Mike said. If it doesn't, right, like it just looks like two-pod traffic directly coming from some unknown source, and the configuration is either, right, to be permissive or strict, and we don't hairpin to waypoints today. Like that was a decision that I've made. And so there are only so many multi-cluster setups that we can actually support. And we at least require that ingress into the cluster from another cluster goes through something that is mesh aware to go to a waypoint, right? Otherwise, there's nothing else that knows to do that routing.
Mesh aware or capable of using, external services, because from all practical purposes, a waypoint is just a service which is pretty much everyone. I mean,
I would describe that as mesh aware in an ad hoc way, Costin.
Yes, that's fine. But I think it's doable. There is no restriction. I mean, with the vast majority of load balancers, it's possible to do it.
Yeah. Okay. But it's that requirement, like that there's some mesh awareness. That's really the important part.
Light mesh awareness.
Yeah, ad hoc, whatever we want to call it, but
ad hoc. Yeah, ad hoc is fine as well. Yes. But I think my point is we don't have too many choices. I mean, it seems to be that kind of we are forced by the requirements to support this mode.
Okay. Well, anyway, it needs to be written up. If I get some cycles, I can try and write that up. We can review it and decide what we want.
I can definitely help contribute to that, or at the bare minimum review.
Okay. Appreciate it, Mike.
Just so everyone knows, this is not ambient core GA blocker. Is that correct? Based on our agreement earlier?
Okay. Yes, that's true. If we see more user feedback, we might have to think about that a little bit.
And even if it was, what we discussed is not, just not documented and not explained and not doesn't have a good UX, but it's entirely possible today if you know how to do it with existing configs and existing rules.
Yeah, I think clarifying the existing default behavior is the only part of this that should be like a GA blocker, of just like clearly documenting what happens right now and if that's a thing we're okay with. And then like we can layer on additional configuration, additional topologies requiring gateways for east-west, whatever, to make this to more cleanly enable the UX that some users seem to be wanting.
I wouldn't call it blocker. I mean, I would say that, we have all the elements to make it work. Documentation can come at any point.
Like, to be clear, it doesn't work today, right? Because the ingress gateway sends directly to workloads.
Unless you configure the ingress gateway to send to the waypoint, which you can do if you use explicit configurations. I mean, you can ignore what.
Yeah.
So that for external clusters, you can specify, service entry and then which are service and everything else. You are perfectly. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Yeah, and that is one definition of working for like particularly latency sensitive customers that want to not have mesh rules as a layer behind their ingress and just configure things directly at the ingress to have the most expedient path to their backends. Like that is what Lou was saying earlier, is like what we decided should be the default behavior initially. That is a thing that has valid use cases, and yeah.
For one cluster. I think we decided
Yes.
also and completely agree. I mean, that's both. So for a single cluster, both of them are options that the user can choose. It's not if you know. I mean, if you want to use same implementation for waypoint and ingress, and the ingress is capable of enforcing everything the waypoint is doing, you can skip bypass a step for local clusters. But if you go to a different cluster, you still need to go to a waypoint because you need to apply the policies that are defined there.
I think I agree with all of that.
Wow.
Okay, anyway, no matter what, this needs to be written up, and then we can assess what we want to do in terms of timeline.
Yeah, sounds good.
Should we have any consideration for like how sandwiching would affect this as we write it up? Because I think the behavior, like the just out of box behavior, would be quite different if you just sort of naively sandwich.
And certainly for non-Istio ingresses, we're going to have to think about that. So yes.
Yeah, like I think today, if you had a third-party ingress and you just captured it with ztunnel, it would obey waypoint. So it just looks like a workload to us.
Right. I mean, that is what Sarko did in his workaround. Effectively.
Yeah. Right. Because I'm thinking, is that sufficient before upstream gateway, have more definitive decision on this?
Don't know.
Yeah, that would be a weird documentation thing. Just don't use Istio ingress gateway if you want to observe waypoints.
All right. Well, we all agree that something needs to be written up one way or another. And then we can see what makes sense in terms of prioritization.
Sorry, I didn't follow all the PRs. What is the status with the sandwich for gateways and for other things?
I mean, any job running in the cluster that's in Ambient will get Ambient's semantics for routing to endpoints and services when it's sitting on top of ztunnel.
Yeah, but there are some work to make to have Istio ingress be able to sandwich and take advantage of AJ proxy and other stuff. Is it fully implemented or working?
I don't believe so, no.
AJ proxy, I saw that it's mostly working. I just don't know if we can take advantage. Other people can take advantage for it.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by HA proxy, Justin.
Sorry, the proxy protocol. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
the passing metadata about the peers in the header, and then the gateway being aware of that and using it.
Yeah, I don't think that's implemented.
Well, and that helps a lot with sandwiching like a waypoint, but for an ingress gateway, I think it would matter somewhat less, since it's acting to Z-tunnel like basically purely as a client.
If it runs in cluster, I mean, any gateway that runs in cluster will be intercepted by Z-tunnel.
Yeah, I guess that's a question of like an Istio ingress gateway. Is that sending directly or is that sending through Z-tunnel?
If it has a label, yes, otherwise no. I mean, if Z-tunnel is enabled by default, I don't know if that's possible, but it will obey.
Well, the same way that a waypoint doesn't have its traffic forwarded to a Z-tunnel, I would expect the same to be true for the ingress gateway.
I think it depends how you install the ingress. My understanding from the code and what I've seen is that if a pod has a right label, CNI will intercept, otherwise it will not. So if you don't label the namespace or the pod, or we happen to have the exclude rules, we are good. Otherwise, CNI will do its job. It doesn't know if it's an ingress or not. So depending on how you install, you may or may not be intercepted.
Yeah, I don't know if we have looked at all at like sandwich model as applied to ingress for ambient, because that ends up, I think, feeling pretty similar to like the stick a sidecar proxy next to your third-party ingress mesh model,
Yeah, it
which
doesn't
makes
actually
things mesh
solve.
aware.
It doesn't really solve the problem of going through the waypoint because it's going to be already resolved to a specific pod IP.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would if you're using the workload waypoints, but that's a pretty niche case, right? So it only really gives you MTLS, which is useful,
And
sure,
the
but it's not the same.
And the protocol,
Okay.
I mean, the whole protocol that
Right, yeah, that's what I
other
mean. The
implementations
whole,
not have.
it solves a problem for sure. It just doesn't solve the same problem as going from ingress to waypoint. But,
Mhm.
and I don't know that that's something you always want, like Louis said. I think it needs an opt-in.
Well, it's also, for example, multi-cluster, because if waypoint, if Z-tunnel, the sandwich one is aware of this, then a sandwich gateway of any type would know where to go to the waypoint in the removed cluster, and so it's not only MPLS, it's also awareness of waypoints in remote clusters.
I don't think we're going to come to a concrete answer here, but we should at least make sure that, like, this is a scenario that is listed on whatever doc that we start putting together for this.
All right, sounds good. Hey, Keith, I saw you just joined. Earlier, Jackie asked us to go through the board. So we kind of gone through the board on the master items. So there are two master items. I think one is you and Mitch owned. I don't know if you want to give any update on that. We also did a call to help on the other item, because let me share my screen quickly, because there's no owner at the moment yet.
Yeah, I can give a high-level update. We've Mitch and I have been going through several approaches in older docs that we found around potential multi-cluster designs, and I think the double H-bone approach is looking the most promising. Trying to do some validation and start writing up a doc on the use cases for multi-network and going from there.
Okay.
The main delay has been just vacation. I was out last week, and then Mitch is out for most of this week. So once we able to get together, should have something more to report.
That's awesome. Thank you. Now, I asked the Microsoft team earlier, but since you joined, do you think your team might be able to take some of the other mask items too?
Yes, probably. Which ones don't have owners? Like documentation.
So document one, we can definitely use more owner because there's a lot of work item. John and I already signed up for some of those. So we would definitely have, would love more owner. And then the cross version compatibility right now doesn't have an owner. I think that's about it.
Okay. I know for cross version compat, I'm going to cautiously sign Mitch up for that, since I know he's had a lot of thoughts, even some docs on this in the past. So
Okay.
that's gonna sign Mitch up for that while he's not here. He's more than willing to say no, but I think he's a good person to at least weigh in there. I mean, if he doesn't have bandwidth, we can find somebody else.
All right, cool. So should I assign to him? Oh, are you going to talk to him first?
I think he gets back tomorrow. I think so. I'll talk to him.
Okay, awesome.
Just to
Thank
see
you.
what his bandwidth is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And if you just other people can help with some of these items, that would be super cool too.
Cool. We'll chat internally to figure out who the best folks will be to tackle some of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anything else we should be discussing? If not, I'll give you guys 30 minutes back. Sounds like we're making good progress towards the board. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye, y'all.